Scrum is the most used Agile methodology, and its simplicity makes it an excellent introduction to Agile project management. The Scrum methodology was created by Ken Schwaber and Jeff Sutherland, who currently run Scrum.org and Scrum Inc., respectively. However, Scrum derives from a 1986 Harvard Business Review article called The New Product Development Game by Hirotaka Takeuchi and Ikejiro Nonaka. In it, a single cross-functional team moves the process through a series of overlapping phases. As they do so, they pass the product back and forth through a number of iterations. The name Scrum derives from the rugby metaphor that they used. Takeuchi and Nonaka argued that their process would increase the speed and flexibility of new product development. And Schwaber and Sutherland adopted many of their ideas, which they published in 1995. In 2001, they were among the signatories of the Agile Manifesto. The Scrum Team. Schwaber and Sutherland define 3 roles that make up a Scrum team. These are the roles of the development team, the product owner, and the Scrum Master, and we'll take a look at each in turn. The development team. These are the engineers who build the product or products. The team is self-organizing and self-managing and often cross-functional so that it can tackle the entire process within the one team. The product owner. The product owner is a single individual who focuses on the needs of the customers, the users, and other stakeholders. Their job is to understand what these stakeholders want and need, and to turn them into functional specifications for the work that the development team needs to do in the form of user stories. The Scrum Master. The Scrum Master is a single individual who focuses on the needs of the Scrum team. The Scrum Master facilitates the Scrum process and manages the 5 Scrum events to deliver the project as effectively and efficiently as possible. They are the source of knowledge and advice on the Scrum process, and also the person who will solve managerial and process-related problems. So let's now look at the Scrum process. The Scrum process begins with the product backlog, the first of 3 Scrum artifacts. This is an ordered list of the work that the development team needs to carry out to develop or improve the product or products that they're working on. As a result, the team will commit to a product goal, the first of the 3 Scrum commitments. Sprint planning is the first of 5 Scrum events. It initiates the sprint, the heartbeat of the Scrum process. The output from sprint planning is a sprint backlog, which is the second of our 3 Scrum artifacts. From this, the team commits to the sprint goal, the second of our 3 Scrum commitments. In sprint planning, the team will answer questions like, why will this sprint be valuable? That is, what is the sprint goal? And what can we deliver in this sprint? That is, which elements of the product backlog should we draw down into the sprint backlog? And how will we do our work to meet our definition of done? Typically, sprint planning meetings are time-boxed, often at 2 hours. The sprint itself is the second Scrum event. It is a fixed length or time-boxed period of work for the development team. Outside of Scrum, this is normally known as an iteration. Most commonly, a sprint will be 2 weeks, and its outcome is the delivery of an increment, the third of our 3 Scrum artifacts. During a sprint, the team will hold daily scrums, the third type of Scrum event. At the scrum, usually a morning stand-up, they'll examine their progress towards the product goal. Typically, daily scrums are time-boxed at around 15 minutes and are held at the same time and same place every day. At the end of a sprint, but before the development team can declare that an increment is done, they need to expose it to scrutiny by their users, their customers, their stakeholders. They do this at a Scrum event known as a sprint review, also sometimes called a showcase. The purpose of a sprint review is to determine whether an increment meets the definition of done, the third Scrum commitment. The definition of done is a checklist of criteria that an increment must meet to satisfy the user's requirements and therefore considered to be usable. At the sprint review, the Scrum team and their stakeholders will collectively determine whether the development team need to make any further adaptations to the increment in a future sprint. The sprint review is also an opportunity to discuss progress, review the product backlog, and determine the next set of priorities. Typically, sprint reviews are time-boxed at around an hour. Once the Scrum team has delivered their increment, they will meet to discuss their work together. This is the fifth Scrum event, and it's called a sprint retrospective. Sprint retrospectives involve the whole Scrum team, but only the Scrum team. They use it to consider the ways that they can work together even more effectively and even more efficiently in the next sprint. The discussion needs to include things like team dynamics, individual performance, development and management processes, the tools and methods that they use, and critically, they need to work to an outcome where they have a set of tangible actions that they can take to improve their process in the next sprint. Typically, sprint retrospectives are time-boxed at around an hour. By the way, you may wonder why I've been talking about around an hour or around 2 hours rather than an hour or 2 hours. And that's because for me, hour or 2 hour meetings are not good practice, because if you have two back-to-back hour-long meetings, you have no time in between to get from one to another, or indeed to reflect on what you've learned in the previous meeting and prepare for the next. I prefer 50 or 55-minute meetings, or 1 hour and 50-minute meetings, so that you have the time at the end of a meeting and before the next. The Scrum framework is based on a number of carefully considered underlying principles. So let's take a look at what they are. The two bases of Scrum are lean thinking and empiricism. Lean thinking is a principle which places a strong focus on what is essential and another equal focus on eliminating waste. Empiricism is the principle that we can only really rely on information that we gather from experience or direct observation. Scrum offers us 3 pillars of empiricism that we can see in the Scrum events. The first is transparency. All work must be visible to the whole Scrum team and their stakeholders. This allows anyone to inspect, to understand, and to critique the work that the team is doing. So inspection is the second pillar. We must inspect all the work that we do, and we must inspect it often. Only this will allow us to detect problems and to detect them early. And when we detect a problem, it allows us to adapt accordingly. So the third pillar is adaptation. If we find problems, or if we deviate from our sprint goal or our product goal, then we need to adapt accordingly. And of course, the sooner we make these changes, the better. And finally, under principles, Scrum encourages its team members to adopt and work to 5 values. The first is commitment to achieving the product goal and the sprint goals, and to supporting one another in doing so. The second is focus on the work that the team needs to do to meet each sprint goal in the most effective and efficient manner. The third is openness openness about the work that we're doing, and an openness to feedback and critique and challenge. Without this openness, how can we have the honest conversations that are going to improve the work that we do and spot problems early? The fourth value is respect. Respect for individuals, respect for their capabilities, and respect for their ability to focus on the work that they are doing to contribute to the current sprint. The fifth value is courage. The courage to do what is right rather than what is expedient. And also the courage to tackle difficult problems, to pursue the awkward questions, and to take on the toughest of challenges. Finally, let's talk briefly about Scrum learning and certification. The two principal organisations are the Scrum Alliance and Scrum.org. Each one has its own Scrum certification courses and exams and qualifications. The Scrum Alliance offers 17 certifications in 5 tracks. The Scrum Master track has 3 tiers of Scrum Master certification, starting with CSM, Certified Scrum Master. The Product Owner track has 3 tiers of Product Owner certification, starting with CSPO, Certified Scrum Product Owner. The Developer track has 3 tiers of Developer certification, starting with CSD, Certified Scrum Developer. The Agile Leadership track has 4 tiers of Agile Leadership certification, starting with CAL-E, Certified Agile Leadership Essentials. And there are 4 tiers of Coaching and Training certification, starting with CTC, Certified Team Coach. The entry point to all of this for project managers is CSM, Certified Scrum Master. Scrum.org offers 13 certifications. There are 4 main tracks and 4 additional certifications. The Scrum Master track has 3 tiers of Scrum Master certification, starting with PSM 1, Professional Scrum Master 1. The Product Owner track has 3 tiers of Product Owner certification, starting with PSPO 1, or Professional Scrum Product Owner 1. The Developer track has 1 tier of Developer certification, PSD, or Professional Scrum Development. And the Agile Leadership track has 2 tiers of Agile Leadership certification, starting with PAL, Professional Agile Leadership. There are also 4 special topic certifications: SPS, or Scaled Professional Scrum, PSK, Professional Scrum with Kanban, PSU, Professional Scrum with User Experience, and PSFS, Professional Scrum Facilitation Skills. The entry point for project managers here is PSM1, or Professional Scrum Master 1. I'll put links to the courses I recommend and a range of other resources in the description. If you are a project manager with no experience of Agile project management, then I recommend 2 things. First, you engage with and start to learn about Agile project management. And secondly, that learning about Scrum formally is a great place to start. In this video, I want to answer the question, what is Kanban? Over the years, Toyota has been a powerhouse for developing ideas that we now find throughout the world in organisations of every kind. These ideas include Lean and Kaizen and the 7 Wastes, 5S, Poka-yoke, Jidoka, Six Sigma, and indirectly Scrum. And I give you one more, Kanban. Yes, Kanban started out as part of Toyota's just-in-time production system, a system that is now known as Lean. And the word Kanban refers to cards that graphically represent the flow of components and finished products through the production system. And as project managers, we've now taken that visual metaphor and used it to represent the flow of activities through the project process. Kanban has risen in popularity massively over recent years with the growth of Agile project management. Kanban on its own is a powerful project management process, and combined with other Agile methodologies like Scrum can be even more useful in a wider range of circumstances. Kanban was obviously designed in a manufacturing environment, so perhaps the obvious question is, what's it got to do with project management and how do we make it apply? So let's take an example. Well, if you think about manufacturing, raw materials go into a pipeline. A series of processes take place and a finished product comes out the end. Now let's look at a project. Some requirements go into a pipeline. A series of processes take place and a finished deliverable comes out of the end. What Kanban does is make the position of each requirement in the pipeline very clear. And if some are getting stuck and there's a bottleneck, the project manager can easily spot it, and then they can deploy resources to address the issue. So Kanban is a visual system for tracking the progress of work through the project lifecycle. It starts with a list of stages which you show as columns on a board. These columns are sometimes called swim lanes, and each unit of work is then represented as a card. The team moves these cards from one lane to the next as their work progresses. Team members draw work items into the first active zone as capacity allows. Kanban is ideal for distributed responsibility and light touch leadership, and therefore is perfect for Agile project management. So here's my definition of Kanban in the context of project management. Kanban is a visual method for managing the creation of products through a fixed set of steps. It puts an emphasis on continuous flow from initiation to delivery. Let's see how Kanban works. First, you need to set up your Kanban board. Start by describing the stages that are relevant to your process. Typically, these might include a waiting or backlog stage at the start. There may be some progress stages, such as analysis, development, and testing. Then there'll be a completed stage, and maybe also an abandoned stage. Next, you need to determine your work in progress limit. Work in progress, or WIP, is the number of tasks in any one swim lane. If there are more tasks than the team has the capacity to manage, then the pipeline will become blocked. Work will get stuck in this stage, and new work entering it will back up. The stage beyond the bottleneck will empty, and team members will be underutilised. So, set a limit for the amount of WIP you will allow in each stage. Third, create a card for each task. You'll need a card for every task that needs to flow through the process. You can add information to the cards as they move, like who is handling it and the time estimates. Colour coding and symbols are also popular. Finally, allow your team to work on their tasks. Let your team members bring a card onto the board and work the tasks. When they complete a stage, they can move the card to the next lane. It's also worth having some rules about how resources are applied to cards. For example, if I complete a stage for one task, can I move the card to the next swim lane without explicitly handing over responsibility? Or do I need first to find someone who will take responsibility and it becomes their job to move the card? If it isn't my responsibility to find someone, whose is it? Or are we going to allow the card to wait until someone picks it up and moves it forward, taking responsibility themselves? But then, what if no one wants that responsibility? Each team needs to find a set of rules that suits it. So Kanban, It's a simple graphical way of monitoring project progress, allowing the whole team to participate, not just in engaging in the project, but in controlling the progress and sharing responsibility. It's part of the Agile project management toolset, but any project manager can incorporate it into any project where you think it can contribute to effective and efficient running of your project. In this video, I want to answer the question, what is Scrumban? In earlier videos, I've talked about what is Scrum and I've talked about what is Kanban. And Scrum and Kanban are two methodologies that come under the wider umbrella of Agile project management. And yes, I've also done a video about that. So what is Scrumban? Well, Scrumban is kind of like merger of Kanban and Scrum into one methodology. And of course, as you'd expect, the people who developed Scrumban were trying to bring out the best characteristics of each and do away with the weaknesses of both. So, what are the strengths of Scrum that we want to preserve? Well, clearly it's the idea that we have a fixed amount of stuff that needs to get done by a deadline. But what Kanban allows us to do is to give flexibility to the team as to how they schedule their work within that time frame, drawing down the right amount of work, but also limiting the amount of work in progress at any one time. So this gives us a Scrumban board, which looks very much like a Kanban board, but with some very specific types of swim lanes. So let's look at a generic Scrumban board and think about the kinds of swim lanes we might expect to give us these benefits. So on the left, we've got our backlog or our queue of tasks that need to get done. And remember that Scrumban may have found its beginnings in software development, as did Scrum itself, but it can be used more widely. Then, just as Scrum brings elements of the backlog into the sprint, we've got the on-deck activities, the things that are going to be done within this sprint or this time box period. Then we can take things from being on deck to being next already. This isn't necessarily part of the process. We might go straight from being on deck to the next swim lane, which is shown here as the doing, the development, the active stage. But it may be that what you're developing needs to be specified, and therefore we may introduce one or even two additional swim lanes between the next and the doing swim lane. These would be specify and specified. So specify is the swim lane where we'll place tasks whilst they're going through the process of receiving their specification, whereas specified is a parking place when something's received its specification but is not ready yet to go into the doing lane. Once we've completed the task of building the product or doing the work, then we can move that product into deployment if that's appropriate, which it will be, of course, for IT projects. And again, we might introduce two additional swim lanes between the development stage and the deployment stage for testing. The first would be a pending stage, awaiting testing or quality assurance or final approval. And then the next would be the quality assurance stage, the approval stage or the testing stage. Then, if the product needs to go into a formal deployment stage, then we've got that swim lane, and finally a done swim lane for products or tasks that have been completed. So all Scrumban is a hybrid methodology. It adds to the number of methodologies available to you under the broad Agile umbrella. While Scrumban was developed for IT-based projects, the principles are generic, and any good project manager will always be on the lookout for tools and techniques and ideas that you can incorporate into any project you do. So take a look at Scrumban in detail If you think that this idea of a time-boxed sequence of activities that individual team members can draw down and work on as they choose is a useful approach for your project. In this video, I want to answer the question, what is disciplined agile? IBM introduced disciplined agile to the world in 2012 with the book Disciplined Agile Delivery. The US-based Project Management Institute acquired the Disciplined Agile toolset in 2019 and then relaunched it in 2020. Disciplined Agile is not a methodology, it's a toolkit. What this means is that it makes use of a wide range of practices drawn from many different arenas to provide guidance that you can apply in any agile context. Therefore, disciplined agile is scalable. It can work at any scale from that of a single project team all the way up to an entire enterprise. Disciplined agile focuses on the alternatives that are available to you and the choices that you need to make, and therefore the consequences of those choices. It draws on resources and ideas from many places, like Scrum, Kanban, and the Scaled Agile Framework, or SAFe. The intention of disciplined agile is that it gives you all the tools and resources you need to tailor your own approach to meet the needs of your particular project and the culture of your organization. PMI asserts that organizations that adopt disciplined agile go to market sooner, deliver value faster, and make their customers happier. That's a big claim. They go on to say that the Disciplined Agile Toolkit offers guidance to help organizations streamline their processes in a context-sensitive manner, providing a solid foundation for business agility. Within Disciplined Agile, there are 8 principles to guide Agile teams. Let's take a look at them. First, delight customers. Go beyond meeting their needs or even their expectations. Delight them. And this applies equally to your internal customers or user base and to external customers outside of your organization. Second, be awesome. We should strive always to be the best that we can be and to get better as we learn more. Third, context counts. Every team member, every project, every product that we create, every organization that we work for is different. It's unique. And to add to that, you need to acknowledge that situations will always evolve with time. The way they are at the start of the project may be very different to the way that we end up at the end of the project. Therefore, we need to find a way of working that is suited to the context. And of course, we need to evolve that way of working as our context evolves. Principle 4 is to be pragmatic. Your aim needs to be as effective as you possibly can, and then to evolve from there, learning as you go. Pragmatism means doing what it takes to get the job done properly. And therefore, to me, be pragmatic reminds us that all project management is hybrid project management. We draw our ideas, our inspirations, and our tool sets from as many places as we can. Therefore, Principle 5 follows directly. Choice is good. To find the best way of working, we need the widest possible choice of tools and techniques and ideas and models. And to make our selection in an informed way, we also need to understand them, their strengths and their limitations, so that we can understand the trade-offs we make when we select one tool or one method over another. 6. Optimize flow. We need to optimize the flow of work and knowledge and communication across the whole value stream, indeed across the whole organization. Principle 7 is to organize around products or services. If we're going to delight our customers, we need to organize the way we do things around the products or services that they need and value. These products and services determine the value streams which produce the value for our customers, both internal and external to the organization. And finally, Principle 8 is enterprise awareness. We need to look beyond the immediate needs of our team and our project to the long-term needs of the organization and indeed potentially the wider community within which it's set. This means we need to apply our business acumen to make use of and leverage the assets that we have to get the best possible results for our organizations. To support the disciplined Agile toolset, the Project Management Institute offers 4 levels of certification: Disciplined Agile Scrum Master, Disciplined Agile Senior Scrum Master, Disciplined Agile Value Stream Consultant, and Disciplined Agile Coach. To me, the principle of a scalable toolkit that draws from many sources is a no-brainer. Why wouldn't we want something like this? There are some distinct pros and cons, benefits and disadvantages of the disciplined Agile framework. The first strength is that it is a hybrid that pulls together elements from many proven methodologies and approaches. And secondly, this means that it allows teams to apply Agile approaches in a highly customizable and tailored way to meet the needs of their context. However, it does have weaknesses. If you view it as a proxy for a methodology, then it is not a good starting place for implementing Agile within an organization for the first time, because it isn't a methodology and therefore it doesn't offer enough guidance. You need to know a lot to use disciplined Agile effectively. As a result, organizations who want to implement disciplined Agile will almost certainly need to use consultants. And some within organizations would view that as a disadvantage. Although clearly, if you are a disciplined Agile consultant, well, that's a huge benefit for learning disciplined Agile and incorporating it in your own toolkit. It remains to be seen how PMI will incorporate disciplined Agile in its core methodology set and its core practice standards. But for now, disciplined Agile is a freestanding toolkit owned by PMI. And if you're committed to becoming an Agile practitioner, it's an approach and toolkit that is well worth studying and understanding. In this video, I want to answer the question, what is Scaled Agile Framework? Scaled Agile Framework is a framework for Agile development and management at enterprise level, or indeed at any level below that. Hence the name Scaled Agile Framework. We're done. Seriously though, Scaled Agile Framework gives the organization a structured approach for scaling their Agile practice to the level that they need it. It offers 4 different configurations at 4 different scales. Essential Scaled Agile Framework operates at the level of a team or a project or a simple program. Large Solution Scaled Agile Framework works at the multi-project or multi-program level, but where there isn't a consolidated portfolio approach to bringing all the projects and programs together. That's the domain of Portfolio Scaled Agile Framework, which introduces essential concerns for things like governance, strategy, and value. And finally, Full Scaled Agile Framework integrates these three approaches into a single coherent whole, allowing the enterprise to implement Agile at all levels simultaneously in a way that is entirely consistent as you move up and down the levels of the hierarchy, from the smallest team and project to the largest portfolio manager. The Scaled Agile Framework is a body of knowledge that incorporates knowledge, ideas, tools and techniques on things like planning, roles and responsibilities, work management, and agile practices and values. Scaled Agile also provides training and certifications that cover all of the different levels, all of the different tools and practices, and also provide specific training and certifications for contexts like DevOps, development operations, and government. The Scaled Agile Framework tools and techniques draw from a wide variety of sources, particularly from agile software development processes, lean product development, and systems thinking. And like many modern articulations of project management, Scaled Agile Framework is grounded in a set of principles. In its case, there are 10 principles. The 10th principle was introduced into Scaled Agile Framework at the Scaled Agile Framework version 5 iteration. These 10 principles are: take an economic view, apply systems thinking, assume variability and preserve options, build incrementally with fast integrated learning cycles, base milestones on objective evaluation of working systems, visualize and limit work in progress, reduce batch sizes and manage queue lengths, apply cadence and synchronize with cross-domain planning, unlock intrinsic motivation of knowledge workers, decentralize decision-making, and organize around value. And I think if we look at these, we can see a real variety between some obvious, easy to understand principles, many of which are similar to other principles in things like the Agile Manifesto, or indeed the more recent 7th edition of the PMBOK Guide. Others, however, take a fair bit of thinking about. This is quite a sophisticated approach because of the need to scale. Indeed, Scaled Agile Framework is probably the most complex and is certainly the largest in terms of adoption of the Agile frameworks that we find. The other big players are Scrum of Scrums, Large Scale Scrum, and Disciplined Agile. We also have a video about Disciplined Agile, and I'll put a link in the description, but it's important to note that Disciplined Agile is less of a framework than the others and more a tool set of techniques, ideas, and methods. However, because Scaled Agile Framework is the most complex of the different approaches, it is also the one that is best suited to large-scale enterprise adoption. And I think that's probably why it is so widely used. It's also possibly a strength that Scaled Agile Framework is quite prescriptive. It's based closely on the ideas of Scrum. That's also a little bit ironic, the prescriptive nature of Agile methodology being somewhat at variance with the idea of agility and adaptability. Disciplined Agile being nothing more than a tool set is at the other end of the spectrum. But you can see that large organisations wanting a degree of certainty and repeatability throughout the organisation and at different levels will find Scaled Agile Framework very appealing. However, the complexity of Scaled Agile Framework means that its implementation is a big task and often requires the use of implementation consultants to help the organisation not only to adopt the methodologies, but to get the best from them. Implementing Scaled Agile Framework therefore requires a significant investment. An investment not just in money, but in terms of learning, creation of infrastructure, and the support structures which will help people to thrive in a new Scaled Agile Framework environment. In this video, I'll answer the question, what is an Agile release train? An Agile release train is part of the Scaled Agile Framework. And I've done a video that answers the question, what is the Scaled Agile Framework? So I'll put a link to it in the description to this video. An Agile release train is a long-term, dedicated, cross-functional team of Agile teams. Typically, there'll be between 50 and 100 people in total, all working towards a common goal. They will draw from a shared product backlog and follow a shared product roadmap. Agile release trains are organised around the business's development value streams. Their job is to realise the promise of that value by building and delivering solutions that benefit users or customers. They work on a fixed schedule to deliver incremental releases of value with a fixed cadence, usually 2 weeks. This means that the rest of the organisation can plan around this release train schedule with confidence. The Agile release train delivers a continuous flow of value. It follows a cadence of 5, sometimes more, sometimes less, iterations. Typically, each of those iterations is 2 weeks. These form a program increment, which is similar to a product increment in Scrum. The Agile release train is driven by release train engineers. Agile release train engineers are responsible for ensuring that the Agile release trains work together and conform to the Scaled Agile Framework requirements. In this way, release train engineers operate rather like a Scrum Master does for the Agile release train. They're supported by systems architects for technical leadership and product managers for product guidance. The release train engineer and their team will organise the Agile release train around the delivery of value, a value stream. The largest value streams may require multiple Agile release trains to secure all the value that they promise. Business owners are the key stakeholders for the Agile release train and therefore for the release train engineers. It's the business owners who have the ultimate responsibility for the business outcomes and for meeting the needs of their customers or the users. The Agile release train team works on different parts of the same product and it manages its cross-team interdependencies. It needs to be stable, autonomous, and collaborative. It needs to be stable with the specific skills and expertise to deliver all of the components of the full product set. It needs to be autonomous so that it can work independently and get stuff done. And it needs to be collaborative both within and across teams. Often, the individual teams embrace other Agile frameworks like Kanban or Scrum. In summary, Agile release trains are a way to achieve effective cross-functional collaboration in delivering substantial products. And they keep projects tightly aligned to a business goal. However, there is a significant overhead in processes, roles and planning. This requires training, setup and a top-down approach. This makes it most suitable for large technology projects within sizable and mature organizations. Scaled Agile Framework and Agile release trains are simply not suitable for smaller organizations or for nimble, entrepreneurial startup situations. In this video, I want to answer the question, what is the Rational Unified Process? RUP. The Rational Unified Process is an agile software development and project management framework. It's used to develop complex software systems and covers the entire software development lifecycle. It was created by Rational Software, which is now a part of IBM. RUP is the most widely used specific version of the generic Unified Software Development Process, or just Unified Process. The principles of the Rational Unified Process. Unified processes are iterative and incremental. Each iteration is a time-boxed cycle in which we develop a specific part of the software capability. At the end of each iteration, we have a working version of software that we can demonstrate to users and to customers, and that can then go on to be used by those users. RUP predates the Agile Manifesto, but we can see it as an agile approach. Components can be adjusted, and the different stages of the cycle can be repeated until we have the software working in the way that we want it to. Like later Agile frameworks, RUP also places a strong emphasis on gathering and understanding the user's requirements. However, unlike later Agile frameworks, RUP also requires that we understand the final product before we start to plan and create it. This means that in software terms, RUP takes an architecture-centric approach. That's to say, we create an overall design for the software before we start writing a single line of code. The intention here is that the final product will be well structured and therefore easy to maintain. The final principle of RUP is component-based development. This means building our software out of pre-existing components or modules, instead of creating those components or modules from scratch to meet the specific needs. This has the huge benefit of being quicker and also lower risk, because each of those components will already be pre-tested and validated to work. Therefore, we get more reliable code, faster development times, and lower risk. The Rational Unified Process Lifecycle. In the Rational Unified Process, the project lifecycle has 4 phases. I'm going to refer to them as inception, elaboration, implementation, and transition. But other labels are used by different organizations. For example, you might hear the inception phase called modeling, the elaboration phase called analysis and design, the implementation phase called construction, and the transition phase called testing, or testing and deployment, or just deployment. The processes that happen in each phase give us a structured approach to assigning responsibilities and tasks to your team. We can visualize the process with the time dimension running along the horizontal axis with its phases and cycles, iterations and milestones. On the vertical axis, we have the process dimension. This is where we find the activities, the artifacts and the processes. The Rational Unified Process phases. Let's look one at a time at the 4 phases of the Rational Unified Process. The first phase is the inception phase, sometimes called modeling. During the inception phase, we determine what our project's goals are going to be, and we seek to align our stakeholders around that common set of goals. We also need to assess the project's viability and suitability, which will mean creating an outline business case. And for that, we need a requirements model, which will give us a sense of the project's scope. And finally, we might also develop a simple prototype of the user interface that we'll be creating. We also need to carry out an initial risk analysis to get a sense of what the big risks are that can affect our project. And all of this will feed into a business case that we can use to secure the funding we need for the project. And finally, in the inception phase, we also develop a high-level plan which shows how we're going to structure our project. The elaboration phase, also known as the analysis and design phase. During the elaboration phase, we analyze the design and the architecture of our solution in depth. We need to fully understand the end product that our users or customers need so that we can define the architecture around which we're going to build it. We also aim to mitigate any high risks to the project to make sure that we can start with confidence. We need to ensure that our team has a comprehensive understanding of the system that we're building and the way that we're planning to run the project. We need to elaborate and fully understand the details now of the user's requirements. And of course, we'll create a preliminary design for the system that we're going to build. The implementation phase, also sometimes known as the construction phase. This is, of course, where we develop the software system, and we aim to construct it as far as possible out of pre-existing and pre-tested components that have a high reliability and which we can trust. However, where the features that the users need demand something new, this is also the point where we start to code them. The result in all of this is that the implementation phase tends to be the longest and most complex of the phases in the RUP. It typically takes place over a period of months and is divided into 2-week iterations. During this phase, management processes focus on cost and resource management and, of course, on quality assurance. And once we've built applications or parts of applications, we also test them during the implementation stage. The sequence of testing is typically developing components, followed by component testing, then assembling the components into a working system, followed by system testing. You may also like our video on the software testing process, and I'll put a link to it in the description. The final stage of the RUP development lifecycle marks the transition from development to production. Production is the term that we use for when the software becomes available for use. The transition phase sees the final end-to-end testing of the software, dealing with any problems and defects you discovered during that testing process, final user acceptance, and software release into production, where it becomes available to your customers or users. Of course, once the users start working with the system, more problems are bound to arise, and these may require changes to the system. As a result, of course, you'll need to be updating the product to take on board the feedback that you get from your users in the live environment. The RUP process dimension. Across the 4 phases of the RUP lifecycle are a number of processes or disciplines. Let's look at some of those. The first is business modeling. In the Rational Unified Process, we model the business and its processes to understand the system requirements so that we can design our software to match up to the organization's processes. Number 2, requirements. The user requirements describe what the system needs to do and how it must function. Developers agree the requirements with the users during the inception and elaboration phases. We then document those requirements into a vision document. The third discipline is analysis and design. This is where we articulate how we will build the system to meet the user requirements and to fulfill the quality specifications during the implementation phase. Here we create a model design that serves as a blueprint throughout the whole of the construction of the software system. The fourth discipline is implementation. This is the term that RUP gives for the construction of the software system. It happens mainly in the implementation phase, where the components are tested, assembled, and then tested as a coherent system. The fifth process is testing. The objective of testing is to ensure the proper integration of all of the components and the working of the full system. It's where we aim to uncover and then resolve any defects in the work that we've done. Crucially, testing doesn't only happen in some testing phase. We start testing during the implementation phase, and then final end-to-end and user acceptance testing happens during the transition stage. Throughout the RUP process, we're testing for reliability, functionality, application management, and system performance. The sixth of the processes is deployment. This is where we release the completed software system into production to make it available for the users to use. There are many things to do here that include things like packaging, distribution, installation, help and assistance, data migration, acceptance testing, and final user acceptance. In addition, there are 3 supporting disciplines. Configuration and change management, which is about controlling and tracking scope, functionality, and technical change. Project management, the planning, implementation, and monitoring and controlling of the overall RUP process. And environment, customizing the rational unified process to the specific context in which you're applying it. In summary, RUP is an iterative and incremental software development process. Like traditional project management approaches, it is divided into a number of phases, in this case 4. However, like Agile Frameworks, it embraces adaptation and time boxing. RUP is now largely of historical interest. It isn't widely used anymore. But I do think that its blend of agile and predictive approaches is a nice model to understand when you are creating a modern hybrid approach to delivering your project. Please do give this video a like if you've enjoyed it or learned from it. I'll be making loads more great project management videos for you, so please do subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you don't miss any. And I look forward to seeing you in the next one.